A very good evening to all. It is 8:30 and we'll start now. Um, a good number of people have already joined us. So, hello. I welcome everyone. Professor Saika Chaudhary has joined us from Wharton School. Our collaboration with Wharton School started right since the inception of SBIL, and the person who has made it possible from on the side of Wharton School is none other than Professor Saika Chaudhary. Professor Saika Chaudhary, I request you to please put on your webcam.
Yes, my camera is on, at least from what I can see on my end. It's wonderful to join you.
Yes, we can see you now. Welcome.
Okay. Thank you.
Welcome.
It's wonderful to be with you all.
So, welcome you once again. And before taking any more time, I will request our director, Mr. Saroj Patnaik, General Manager and Director of SBIL, to inaugurate. I would like to just introduce Mr. Patnaik. He joined State Bank of India as a probationary officer and has served as Chief Manager HR and Chief Manager L&D. He has been Regional Manager and CDO. Besides that, he has also served in a very important and significant position of DGM BNO before joining as General Manager and Director at SBIL. And he has various degrees because he believes in learning and continuously enriching his abilities. He is a law graduate from Delhi University and has his MBA in HR and a CIB, apart from some other certifications. Sir, I welcome you and request you to please inaugurate the event.
Thank you, ma'am. First, I would like to congratulate you for your this engagement or connection with Wharton. But at the outset, Professor Saika Chaudhary, this is a privileged moment for our SBIL. Of course, there has been engagement, but what else I can share when the engagement is now being reinforced. I know there has been a number of communication by Madam Sally and yourself, and now today I got an opportunity to talk to you, and you are in our platform. This is something an empowering thing, because when we go about Wharton, then we know this is the world's first college of business at the University of Pennsylvania. So this kind of engagement, when State Bank of India connects with this kind of forum, and you are there to take us forward, and this kind of engagement, this kind of creative or relevant themes when you are going to discuss, it makes a hell of a lot of difference. And here I will definitely congratulate Madam Salia. Okay, she has taken it way forward and she has put it in the right perspective. And I'll tell you, in Indian time now it is 8:30 p.m. But just think, everyone is smiling, everyone is feeling empowered. Okay, we are talking to you. For you, it must be very nostalgic because we are calling from Kolkata. So whatever little bit. So this is something regarding your details, obviously, Madam is going to share with you. But nevertheless, I can share something which the audience should also come to know about it. Your journey with Wharton Law School faculty since 2004. But before that, you have had a very privileged and erudite connection with Citibank, McKinsey, and Roland Budget Strategy. What I'm trying to say is, you have got a 360-degree approach apart from the academics and in the relevant practical fields. Now we are here to have discussion with and the what best topic and the present situation it could be. The present situation, COVID now it has affected everyone, including the election of the presidential election of US also. That's the message we get it. So innovation during the crisis. So what could be crisis? I think it has to be defined separately now. The way COVID has come, it is unforeseen, it is unprecedented. I can tell you this is an understatement because no one had thought in that way. Common man or a person of affluence or a politician or an administrator, everything has gone for a standstill. Developing nations like India, it has taken its toll. Yes, the leadership is strong. They have thought in a different manner, but still, the country has really put itself in a halt the way it was marching ahead. The entire global economy is under abnormal crisis. What to talk about India, especially in case of India, the vulnerable section of society like the daily workers, the older people, part-time workers, the migrants. So it has created a situation which has really hit Indian economy in a worse condition, especially our MSME, where the lesser developed state like Bihar, Odisha and other places when there is a migration of labor to take care of industry, there is a huge influx and there is a huge exit also. This kind of situation has created a situation and still the world is searching for ways to circumvent the crisis because still they are feeling in the event of this winter and things, there could be a COVID, there could be a second wave of COVID or third wave of COVID, that kind of situation there. Vaccination, everyone is waiting for this. But what is that crisis? How this crisis is going to be unending or how it is going to be taken care of? This is still, everyone is grappling. I know the mortality has come down and the recovery rate has gone up. In India, it has come up to 92%. Mortality rate has come down to 1.42%. If it is pan world level, we have done outstandingly well. But having said this, the economy has been really badly hit. This is a crisis situation. What is crisis? Just I was being a layman, I was going through what is crisis. There is in China's composition, crisis has two characters. One represents danger, the other represents opportunity. So definitely this cannot be 100% correct definitions of crisis, but one thing is sure that there is an opportunity in crisis. So when the topic was being shown by Madam Salia, I felt it couldn't be more relevant than what the present situation is. So here, the crisis, how we are going to take care of COVID-19 pandemic in this situation, and how the prioritization of innovation can take place. Again, innovation, the idea has come. To me, innovation is seeing what everybody has seen, but thinking what nobody has thought of. Take for the best example is moon. For a poet, he can be romantic or she can be romantic and she can narrate the moon in a different manner. For a layman, it is nothing. Just a moon, it comes in the evening, in the morning, it is not there. For a scientist, he thinks that whether water is there or not, for a ISRO scientist or a space scientist or NASA, they would like to send an aircraft to find it out. A space mission with a human person should go there. So innovation has got a different meaning to different persons. Similarly, take for instance, earlier the distillery or this mineral waters factory now, or the beer factory, now they are preparing sanitizers. What does it mean? That definitely this is innovation. But the situation warranted, people have come out and they have also gone for this. But having said this, whether this innovation in this present emerging market, whether it is adequate. So all these factors, because if I am going to share all these factors, I am not adequately the way Professor Saket, you are going to elaborate. Definitely there will be lot many takeaways because the opportunity and challenges for emerging market is huge. No one were aware of this Zomato and Swiggy, but now people are aware that you call for your Swiggy, then Taj Bengal delicious dish at your home. Amazon, Flipkart, now they have taken to the next level. Now the consultation of doctors in webcam, that is the order of the day. So all these factors has come into the recent past and which has made a difference. And because of that, this innovation in the crisis is going to make a different nomenclature altogether. So in this regard, would definitely like to listen from you. Since Wharton School of Management is already in touch with us, but during this pandemic, what else also the SBIL, the strategic leadership has done? That also would like, this is a forum would like to present before you, because this is the entire discussion of, it is on, now it is in Facebook and YouTube also. So definitely the hit rates or the engagement or the people are going to. So here I would like to present. During this present time of this pandemic, SBL has taken a different 360-degree approach. Apart from the academics parlance, take for instance, for the first time this faculty development program, the BS program, it has been done twice. All these things have been taken in a virtual mode. It has been taken lead by Madam Salia and Subra Sundara. They have taken in a different forum altogether. For the first time, BS training has been done in virtual mode. Apart from that, empathetic leadership, train the trainers, because now the situation is so warranted. The emotional level has to be taken care of. Madam Salia has taken this program of, there are 50 plus our training centers are there. It is headed by senior officer, scale 5 officer, the directors, plus trainers. For the first time, empathetic leaders for train the trainers. That has also been put in place. This is a very sensitization program. You can say it is a workshop or interaction, whatever, that we have taken. But out of this, now the STU, our corporate centers, they have taken a concept called Bandhan to take care of the crisis situation when the real difficult branches, critical branches, that has to be also coached by our trainers in the SBILD in the state level. And these people are also going to be sensitized and to be monitored and give the external training by SBL, headed by Madam Salia and Subrasandra and the entire team. What I'm trying to say is, during this crisis or difficult time also, SBIL has made itself in a relevant realms of relevance. Apart from this, we have also for the first time in EDX course, Madam Salia's topic of unleashing of marketing creativity. That has also found place. So we'll congratulate her. So things are happening. This is one side of the coin. The other side is virtual mode. We have also taken into the next level. Here, first time, apart from other relevant topics, we have gone for beyond boundaries. International lecture series were also present. Special conversation series were also present. For the first time, circle CGMs are also given the platform where they can address the entire staff or their surroundings, and that has also gained grounds. What I'm trying to say is, in this process of our journey, now we have found out the time is evening, but we are so enthusiastic. We feel this is the early morning, and we are taking our shot in such a beautiful manner. And you are icing on the cake so far as engaging with this. What else I can say? I feel proud and privileged. And next time when you'll visit India, it would be our privilege to you visit our institute, and we'd be happy to share your thoughts with all the participants or to all concerned. That's from my side. Thank you very much. You are being here, and we feel privileged. And this is the right occasion, the way SBL going. This is another platform which we feel privileged can take it forward. Now I request Madam Salia to take it forward and navigate further. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for that wonderful inaugural address. Dr. Chaudhary, in the participants today, there are participants from various corporates. So 50% of them are from SBI, and there are the rest 50%, many of them from different banks and some other corporates too. And besides that, the event is also being live streamed on YouTube and Facebook. And I request all participants for a smooth experience of this event to please put off their webcam and their mics, because every byte, is a weight on the system. So please, I request you to mute yourselves and also to put off your webcams. So let the speakers only be on the camera. And I'll now take the opportunity to introduce Professor, and I forgot to introduce myself. I am Saliha Ahmed, DGM Academics at State Bank Institute of Leadership. Professor Saikat Chaudhary is Executive Director, MAC Institute of Innovation Management. I'm reading out most of your CV. The MAC Institute of Innovation Management is the Innovation Institute at Wharton School. And the institute is distinguished by a dual focus on academic thought leadership as well as industry impact. Professor Chaudhary has served on the Wharton School faculty since 2004, where his research encompasses high technology mergers and acquisitions, high-end outsourcing, and tech innovation in dynamic environments. Professor Chaudhary's work has been cited by leading media and he is often interviewed or quoted by the press on contemporary business affairs. He is regularly invited to speak at corporate forums, industry events, and academic conferences across the US, Europe, and Asia. And yes, we have had the opportunity of having in-person workshop with you. Based on his research and experience, he provides consulting on developing and implementing acquisition, innovation management, and corporate growth strategies for numerous leading global companies, besides providing expert legal testimony and advising the Indian government on IT-based economic development opportunities. And as shared by the director already, Professor Chaudhary's prior professional experience includes corporate development at Mansman AG, Citibank, McKinsey, and Ronald Berger Strategic Consultants. There is something personal. I'm so sorry. There is something personal about Professor Chaudhary which I'd like to share, and that he was born and brought up in Europe, and then he has been working in the US, but he still holds an Indian passport. Not only that, he ensured that his children got Indian citizenship. So they came to India for his children to be born in India. So that is something everyone here will connect very strongly with, and that is why I wanted to share this with you. Now, as you know, the topic of this fireside chat is innovation during the crisis and beyond, opportunities and challenges for emerging markets. And we have Professor Chaudhary here, who is the Executive Director of MAC Institute of Innovation Management. And the MAC Institute obviously does a lot of research in innovation. Innovation is crucial for any firm to not only survive, but also to succeed. But more so in a situation where we have seen unprecedented change and sort of an unprecedented crisis, something the like which we have not seen in our memory. So at this point in time, Professor Chaudhary, you are working with many corporates. What are the challenges that the corporates are facing in innovating at this time, which is a crisis period for everyone, not only for consumers, but also for companies, for firms for whom innovating is very, very important. What are the different challenges that they're facing?
I'll be happy to get into that. But first of all, let me just say thank you for inviting me, Dr. Ahmed, and also, Mr. Patnaik, for your generous words. And let me just underscore one thing before I get to your questions. Which is that SBI has been a very special partner for the MAC Institute and the Wharton School. Your top management took the effort back in 2017, 2018 to also visit us. And we see SBI, given its fundamental role in the Indian economy, but also globally as a leading bank, as being a gateway to corporate India and beyond. And so we're very proud to associate with SBI. In particular, the SBIL has been a very strong partner within SBI As you mentioned, we are very happy that we could conduct a corporate innovation workshop with you in January of 2019, and I visited a number of times. It's an impressive facility. More than that, I think what impresses me more is the vision. This is not just an internal training institute, as Mr. Patnaik was also alluding to. This becomes something which trains not only the trainer, but the rest of the industry. I mean, why should it be that we take our cues, we being India, from the rest of the world when it comes to something, right? In finance, for instance, why should we not take the lead and instead become the entity that perhaps resulting out of the crisis also is able to show the world, well, here's how you redefine finance, whether it's for emerging markets or beyond. And I think having the thought leadership angle, having the idea of training other banks, not just in India, but also Southeast Asia, thinking about this as a multifaceted institute that brings together and convenes corporates across industries is a vision that appeals to us and is very much in concert with what the MAC Institute likes to do as well. So thank you for the generous introductions, but I did want to underscore all of these points. I also want to say, I think the ideas that you had mentioned and Mr. Patnaik has also mentioned around crisis also being opportunity, notwithstanding all the obvious challenges and the fact that we don't want to be in a crisis, but also the notion around innovation. I think we'll get into these themes, but it's exciting because innovation is sometimes seen as technology and innovation, technology and product development, but not necessarily as process or organizational development. And I think those are some of the themes that we'll touch on. So let me now think about the comments and the questions that you posed, which is what are the challenges? We have been working with a number of global firms, whether it's you, the Tatas, or for instance, the Ciscos, the Pfizers of this world, thinking about the Mercedeses, the SAPs, cross-industry. And we've had some forums with them. And there are really 4 areas that are emerging as the biggest challenges. One of them is driving technology and innovation, but that is more of an investment as well as a training possibility. The bigger challenge with that is how do we reconfigure organizational processes? It's not just about having Microsoft Teams or Zoom. It's about, well, how do I now manage a team, which is across different locations, for instance? How do I ensure that processes in the organization, such as resource allocation, adapt? In addition to that, though, there are 3 other areas. One is how do I evolve strategy? One of the big questions for us is what is temporary, what is interim, and what is permanent? So at the moment, perhaps, we are adjusting, such as in the retail space where everybody's gotten used to delivery. Will that be how it remains afterwards, or will we prefer to be there in person? In education, which we are both part of in many ways, though you're doing much more than that, it's fine to do these kinds of forums and we enjoy them. We reach more people than we perhaps could have. But at the same time, what parts of it will remain? And I do believe some will, because we can reach more people than we could have ever done before. But at the same time, I do believe people will want to gather in person and meet each other and exchange thoughts in a more serendipitous way. Finally, if you think about it, managing people has become difficult. If you're a leader, like all of you are, and the attendees in our forum certainly are, how do you manage a team? How do you nurture a culture? It's fine if you have existing relationships, but how do you build new ones? That's very challenging in this work from home type of environment. And then the last point, the crisis has become synonymous with sustainability and how we lead a more sustainable lifestyle, perhaps in our own ways, whether it's travel, but also in terms of the environment. There's a close association. So how do we factor that in? How do we become sustainable organizations, not just in the environment sense, but also how do we build resilience? All of these are the challenges that we see our partners grappling with.
Yeah, Madam, I'd like to add something, Professor Chaudhary. Actually, regarding this corporate vision for this crisis situation, there is a very interesting, after the new chairman, esteemed chairman has come into being, he has given a message which has been very profound and very loud and clear. His message is the positive energy helps individual and organization to tide over the most uncertain and difficult times. And here they expected the training center or the institute should create a wave of positive energy. And this could be possible the way we are facing, because the situation has been, whether it is a worst or a bad, it is for everyone. But how? Because being an essential service, all the branches or the bankers, they are in the market. And here, the call of the new chairman has really given an impetus to what we are there. And especially after this half-yearly result results where the bank has done outstandingly better than the previous ones. Again, he has given a very, very nice kind of theory. The theory is positivity spreads happiness, happiness spreads positivity. It's a quid pro quo. So this is a message apart from the kind of situation, the corporate vision of SBI. So because this is also one of the vision, so whether SBIL or STU or our controllers, they also think we must engage with persons like you, so that this creativity and this interaction, this will have some positive results ultimately. Because this intangible intercourse or the intangibility process, that is definitely ultimately tangibilized so far as our workforce is concerned, or so far as the way ahead is concerned. So this is what I wanted to present. This is the position of SBI, where we are thinking in a very positive manner. SBIL, for that matter, or STU, they are devised a program called Bandhan. That is another sensitization program which has been mainly propounded for this. Thank you very much, madam. Please go ahead.
Thanks. Professor Chaudhary, as you were saying, everyone is facing problems in various processes, managing people, and we too, although being a bank and of essential services, our people have been working even during the pandemic, even during lockdown. So people have been there and they've been facing various challenges. But I think managing people has not been a big issue for SBI. I would like you to throw some light, if you have some examples of how other organizations might be feeling these challenges. And you also talked about driving technology and innovation. If you would like to share some examples that you want to.
Most certainly, there are plenty of examples. And one thing I just want to say, I noted one person mentioned that I should be made, or the speaker should be made full screen. So I'm not sure whether I'm appearing as full screen or not. But I hope all of you can see me as I make my comments as well. I think the examples are very important, but also the important point that you made is that, Dr. Ahmed, there are differences in how different countries and different regions and different companies are going about the crisis, right? So a place like India has been functioning and opening up to a much greater degree than I think, say, the European or the North American countries. And so, we do see a difference here where it's much more work from home. So some of the challenges in these various areas that we have been observing, ironically, the companies that are the propagators and at the forefront of technology have been used to working really in real time, in person. So Google, Amazon, and the like, they're not used to working at home. In fact, they built all these nice campuses with lots of food options. And
best workplace.
best workplaces because they work in person. The reason is to do innovation and to have that so-called water cooler conversation requires people not just in a planned fashion coming together, that might be fine for executing operations, but to really have those more casual get-togethers, interactions, and pull people aside and just work on these ideas, right? And so that's been one of the challenges, whether it's Google or it's Cisco, but especially the startup scene. They've struggled a lot with being at home and not having those serendipitous moments and being able to innovate in that fashion. So I think that's something that has been difficult and it hasn't been resolved, which is why even though companies like Microsoft have been saying that, yes, post-COVID, people can stay at home 50% of the time, nobody's abandoning the offices, right? I mean, to some extent, yes, they might reconfigure them. If you don't have to come all 5 days, perhaps you come 3 days a week, but no one's abandoning that model. We have not been able to solve how to do problem solving. So pretty much any tech company that you take is facing this struggle. A couple of other things that you mentioned. On the technology and innovation front, what is table stakes now is this whole idea of digital transformation, right? So digital transformation was something that was underway earlier as well. Whether you look at it in retail or not, it's just been accelerated. And I think that's something in banking, and I want to ask you on that in a minute as well, how you're seeing it, because this whole idea about fintech, in particular new payment systems, contactless banking, web banking, especially in a market like India, I think these things can take off and it can bring efficiency to the system. That's an example of something that's been continuing, starting and growing, but I think now has taken on perhaps a different level. The challenges are bigger in areas like travel and hospitality. So when we're working with the airlines, for instance, I mean, they're decimated at the moment, undoubtedly so, because their very essence is people traveling back and forth. Even they are pivoting to some extent because cargo has become an integral component. In fact, if I give you an example you'll chuckle about, the Singapore Airlines flight from Zurich to Singapore that now, traverses a few times a week has only about 10 passengers on average. So why does Singapore Airlines keep it? Because the amount of cargo that's going on it, and especially with passenger flights being down, the cargo capacity is lower, which means that the prices are much higher. At this moment, the cargo is more than compensating for that, and the flight is actually profitable. So there are interesting pivots of that kind as well.
That's so
Pharmaceutical,
interesting.
the pharma industry was placed before an unprecedented challenge. Instead of spending 3 or 4 years coming up with a vaccine, do so in 8 months. And how do we come up with that? So we'll talk about solutions, but those are some of the real challenges that different sectors are facing.
And now that you've talked about challenges, would you also like to share with us how are these companies dealing with these challenges? What are they
Most
doing to address these challenges?
Yes, I think the fundamental point Mr. Patnaik had also mentioned, which is how do you leverage the crisis as an opportunity? So let's face it, good companies, healthy companies, smart companies will actually come out ahead of this crisis because their competitors will fold or will falter, and these successful companies will come out ahead. What does it mean, though? I mean, leveraging crisis as an opportunity sounds really nice, but how do you really think about that? I'll give you the example of Disney. So, Disney is a company which we all know for the movies that they make. We also know they have theme parks. People visit Disneyland and Disney World in different parts of the world. Now, unfortunately, the theme park business is completely decimated right now. People are not visiting the theme parks. What Disney has done is use this opportunity to instead accelerate its streaming offering. We all know about Netflix, which has come as a disruptor to dominate the scene and is giving all the traditional independent studios, but also the big networks, a lot of grief because they have really been able to create new content and distribute it. Amazon Prime does it to some extent as well, but Netflix has captured the world. Even in India, there are so many new shows that come out on a regular basis, it's hard to keep track. Disney used the opportunity to also internally push themselves. Why? Because crisis is a time of opportunity to also push transformations internally that would otherwise meet with resistance. Imagine during a time when theme parks and the traditional Disney business is booming, it would be very hard to get attention and resources to something like their streaming service and pushing that. Historically, people will say this is not what we do. This is the classic incumbency problem. However, now is a good time because streaming is rising rapidly and the theme parks are not doing so well to allocate the resources internally, allocate the people internally to push that and move ahead. The auto companies are doing the same, even though it's unrelated, seemingly. Car sales are down, but what they're using is they're somehow associating this crisis with a general, notion that we are no longer able to live sustainably in the world that we are in. And so we must move towards electric. Now, technically, there's no real link between the virus and sustainability per se, but the two are associated because perhaps we're encroaching on the environment in some way and causing these kinds of viruses then to transmit from animals to humans, and there's a link. But auto companies, one by one, have been using the opportunity, whether it's Mercedes-Benz or the large US ones or the Japanese makers, to commit themselves to the transition to electric. And these are the kinds of ways in which they handle it. Another piece is, like I mentioned, the pharma industry. How are they handling it? They're thinking about it as not just product or product innovation, but process innovation. The pharma industry has been taking many years to come up with drug development, and that's been the norm, that it takes around 10 years to get from the idea to something which is approved and works. It's too long. But what's not happened is process innovation. Today, what we see is the only way we see these 8-9 month developments. And today, you all probably saw the good news about Pfizer's vaccine together with BioNTech, how it's been able to have at least 90% efficacy in the current trials. How have they done it? They've done it by incorporating artificial intelligence and data much more. And they've done it by collaborating with new firms, but also across firms, across competitors in ways that we haven't seen before. So these are some of the mechanisms that are being deployed. New technology, but at the same time, new organizational models, partnerships, for instance, between characters that would not have done or actors that would not have done it before, and that accelerates the speed of innovation. I hope that these approaches will remain.
Disney are known for their creativity, so no wonder that they have taken this opportunity to be even more creative. I would like to share a couple of examples from India, how we have taken it as an opportunity. So, in India, the personal protection equipment for healthcare workers, the number was zero. We were not producing any personal protection equipments at the beginning of the pandemic. But within a couple of months, or let's say 3 months, the industry grew to produce close to 500,000 kits a day, and now it is a 10,000 crore industry. So that is complete innovation, something that we were not doing at all. We started doing it, and then again there is a push for electric cars. Tata's, Mahindras, they have already committed, and I'm sure that this will take a surge. This graph. What we did is the digital. Now, as you know, Indian economy, a large part of the population lives in the semi-urban and rural areas, and taking the digital banking to them was has been a challenge. Has been a challenge because the acceptance of people of an innovation is also very important to make the innovation successful. Um, so initially, just after the pandemic struck, that was in March somewhere for India, there was a dip in digital transactions. However, after June, we can say, or right from May, we can say that the transactions have started picking up. We are focusing more. We have a new vertical, which we hope the results are yet to come. But if we compare the digital transactions at the end of quarter two with the previous year's transactions, we have, despite the backlog of the first quarter, we have touched that level, and the graph is going up. So I think one advantage of this will be that more transactions, different types of transactions, and not only payment and receipt transactions, but even loans are going to pick up on the digital platforms.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And I want to make an observation and follow up with you a little bit, given your experience as well. The reality is, and here's where I want to make a case for India. Even in the SBI relationship, where our students and our faculty work with SBI and its innovation center, we learn as much, if not more, from you, as much as then we can contribute. And the reason is that, if you think about it, what's happening in countries like India is, if you look at any crisis, a crisis is about managing the uncertainty that comes with it, right? And being adaptive, being very, agile. And that's where I believe that India has an advantage. Just due to the general conditions, whether it's infrastructure or the continuous challenges, there's always some minor crisis going on, right? It's a perpetual thing. And as a result, the system is used to adapting and adjusting all the time, just like the way you described. In fact, I want to use the disinfectant example. In India, not only the large corporations, be they Berger Paints or Asian Paints, but even the small and medium-sized enterprises started producing PPE and disinfectant very, very quickly. In the West, they struggled and waited for imports for so many months before getting that under control. It's almost inconceivable how a company like a Procter & Gamble or a 3M or, for instance, a Henkel took so long to be able to adjust one or two of their product lines and take the manufacturing capacity and move it towards PPE, right? And that didn't happen even on a smaller scale. This is why I believe that India is going to be and can use the opportunity of this crisis to come out ahead. Education, healthcare, manufacturing, supply chain, all these are areas, fintech, of course, When it comes to SBI, I wanted to ask you also about the digital transactions and the banking side. Look, you have more services covering a much larger scale of customers across so many different segments than any Western bank can ever imagine. So yes, you might look at Citi, they do some things well, but you should be the leader. And so I'm curious to see more on what you observe. How have innovations been growing? Is it all about frugal innovation? Is there another facet, that you observe? How is it that the Indian system, and SBI in particular, has been so innovative to adjust to the crisis, but beyond that too?
In State Bank of India, I think innovation has been part of the way we've grown up, because had we not innovated, the bank wouldn't have survived for such a long period. We are more than 200 years old. And right from manual banking to we had branch specific servers, and then we went on to the core banking solutions. And the latest was Yono, which is a bank on the digital platform. So it does virtually everything that a bank does, and beyond that, because what technology in the financial area allows us to do is to collaborate with so many partners outside banking. For example, e-commerce or insurance companies, other financial companies. Um, a huge number of opportunities open up when technology comes into play. And for the past couple of years, the Reserve Bank of India, the central bank of the country, has been talking about open banking. That is also happening because of the technology interlink that is available. And so a number of changes are going to come. Of course, brick and mortar might be replaced more by digital banking. The other thing that is going to happen is we'll have more transparency, and competition will be tougher because of the transparency. But the good thing is that there'll be more transparency, and uh, the services are reaching everyone at a much more reduced rate as to what it used to be. And now that we also are going for financial inclusion and micro market, which is a separate vertical which will be looking mostly at the rural and semi-urban areas, we hope that in the future also, um, this particular focus on the semi-urban and rural areas is going to bring in digital transactions to that, which is largely unbanked area.
I find that very exciting. And the reason I find it exciting is what you just described is such a wonderful example of leapfrogging, right? Earlier the notion of innovation, especially the relationship between innovation in emerging markets and the more advanced countries, quote unquote, was always that, oh, why don't we emulate what is happening in the West, right? And I think that's one way of thinking about it. And perhaps there's some areas where you don't need to reinvent the wheel. But the other way to think about it is, why not leapfrog? Why not go a step ahead? Like with wireless and mobile, for example, rather than landlines, which has enabled a country like India, but also China and African countries to be connected. What you describe is powerful. What's even more powerful is what you mentioned, which is that if we can take cutting edge technology and we can marry it with approaches that are novel and can leapfrog, just as you're describing in the rural markets and the financial inclusion, right? Then that can create cost-effective solutions which can be used not only in emerging markets, but much beyond. And I find that extraordinarily exciting. There's an ad that I saw, and I don't know if you've seen it recently, but it's by Cadbury. And it is using micro targeting in a way that's unprecedented. So it's a you could call it a generic ad, where the mother is and the parents are there and they're giving gifts to each other on the occasion of Diwali. Now, what's happening as part of it is embedded within that is a little mention of a particular store. So one gift happens to be jewelry. Another gift happens to be a sari. And so what is embedded in there is the name of the store. Now, I thought that particular name of the store that's appearing in the version that I saw is the one which is the actual store where it comes from. But it's actually not the case. It's a generic piece of clothing or jewelry. And what Cadbury has done is, depending on where the PIN code is of the person who's watching this, they have taken a local business, a smaller one, not one of the larger ones, and they have inserted that name, reminding people that you can get such items at that store. Now, it's so sophisticated, it's based all on artificial intelligence. You could say that maybe it's not completely authentic, but it's doing a good service because it's promoting the small and medium-sized sector. It's promoting even beyond that the mom and pop store, which is on the corner that we have to keep visiting to keep them surviving during this time. And it's such a brilliant example. I've never seen this type of micro targeting.
Yeah, that is a beautiful ad, and there is a lot of focus on by the government on local products and services. So we have that slogan, "Vocal for Local." But I wanted to ask you, going on ahead, because we are talking about innovation during crisis and beyond. So, and we've been talking about opportunities. So, what are the opportunities that you see during this time? For which sectors, which companies, and what do you see in the future?
I see a number of different opportunities. I'm very excited because every crisis, even in historic terms, has led to something that's novel, right? And for me, the question is, what do we go back to and what do we not? I think, if we look at some new sectors, for instance, that will come, I'm excited about materials if I use something very different. Why? Today, we're worrying about disinfectants. We're trying to keep every surface clean. And, this is probably not the first virus that's going to affect us, given the mobility that we have in the world. It's just we need to contain it and manage it better. So now I foresee that nanotechnology finally will get its day. And there will be new materials that are developed, which, for example, inherently take care of viruses and bacteria and do the disinfection right on its surface, right? So that's one example. If we look at the more traditional industries, I think this is an opportunity to be more flexible and to unlock the efficiency and the effectiveness of companies. What's very evident is people's lifestyles have been, in some sense challenging. Think about the commute, whether in India, in any major city, if you're on the outskirts and getting into the city, it's not the distance, it's always the traffic. The same thing applies in Silicon Valley, where everybody commutes 1.5 hours to get to their office. It's somewhat inefficient. So some level of working from home, I think, is very, very powerful and can really help us in unlocking the maximum and having more mental balance on that. I do think people will go back to the office and do innovation as well. When it comes to something like retail, I do think that the combination of the convenience of ordering from home and having things delivered and then going in when you need it will help a lot of retail also transform, so that you don't have to have as much of the physical footprint. You can also transition to a system where we can use that footprint for something else. And instead, we are able to have a more seamless interaction with the customer. Even more exciting is the more we start using digital, the more what we can do is we can get more data. So, for instance, in your case as well, the more banking takes place on digital platforms, for instance, right? The more you get information on how people are using that. As a result, you can keep tailoring your products and services in much better ways than we could earlier, which is a very, very powerful thing. And I find that to be very, very, intriguing. In education, if I may use our example as well, all of us at top universities in particular, if I may call us that, what we're used to is we used to think that the online medium is for, yes, universities that are not quite at that level because the magic that we offer in person is a different experience. And perhaps that's also still true. But I can imagine a lot more hybrid programming taking place. Why is that so powerful? We thought of hybrid programming earlier only for the next layer of executives. So let's take Wharton Executive Education, for instance, right? We used to think about it as, okay, so the people who are at the highest level will be sent by their companies to interact in person so they can also build networks and really get the full experience. The next layer of executive will receive some sort of online version. Today, as we're running online exec ed versions, we actually realize that's not entirely true. There are executives at the highest level who would never have the time to come for a 2-week program if they had to travel and really make that physical effort. Instead, they join us now in our executive programs because we could otherwise not get them. So it's a very different way for us to think about the problem. I think the way that the technology sectors will work, it will be much more democratized. I think India will have a huge advantage because what will happen is this whole notion of distributed work, which is frankly pioneered by the outsourcing model. It's not about outsourcing, but it's about this distributed model that TCS or Infosys or Wipro used in order to connect with their global clients. That's the bigger power, right? That kind of thing will be even more normalized, except on the higher end of doing work. And so I see a company like a Cisco or a Google becoming more comfortable with that. And all of a sudden, the Hyderabad office or the Bangalore office will become even more integral to the global innovation and not just do the secondary work, maybe the work that they didn't want to do in the Bay Area and do it. So these are just some examples. But for me, it's not product innovation is only one piece. The process innovation is a much bigger piece, the organizational innovation and perhaps business model innovation too. Those are just some of the thoughts that I have on this front, and I'm happy to share more examples. But if you have some thoughts, I'm happy to hear your thoughts.
I would like to ask you a little bit more on this particular point. So you mentioned process innovation. So would you like to share something more with us on that? And the second question I'll ask after that. So something more on process innovation opportunities.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think that when we think about it, right, I'll come back to the pharma example. There are many sectors which have experienced disruption, but other sectors which had not experienced disruption prior to being induced to do so by the crisis, right? So I'll use pharmaceuticals again as an example because this whole model that was developed is based on combinatorial chemistry, which basically means that I discover a compound that may work or seems to have some promise, and then I try in really a brute force fashion all the possible combinations and try these combinations and see which is the most effective drug. That process takes a good decade from beginning to end. Now, that's not sustainable because we will have a higher rate of all kinds of new things hitting us. So what the crisis has forced is these pharma companies to think a little bit differently. I'll use an analog from the aerospace industry. There used to be a time when the development of an aircraft took closer to 15 years. And the reason that was the case is every single part that was created had to be physically flown and tried and tested to understand its behavior until people started developing simulation. In fact, a number of Indian companies, some based in Pune, have been instrumental in the highest end examples of that. And what is powerful about that is with simulation, I no longer need to try every part, which is why, even though it still is a long time, an aircraft platform does take 5-6 years to be developed, such as the Dreamliner, for instance, and even then it runs late. What has happened over time is it's shrunk. And so why? Because we can now simulate a lot. Now imagine if we can incorporate simulation, which the companies now, like the Pfizers and the Astras and everybody's doing, using data that they already have to simulate some of the behaviors. You can't perfectly do it because it's not like physics. The human body has many different variables. But if we can do that, we can shrink product development to 4 or 5 years. So post-COVID, I do not expect the same 10-year time horizon anymore. I expect the lessons of working with outside partners on the one hand, that's also a type of process, but also using AI and big data to create simulation models to be much more powerful. That's one example. The other one is closer to your home. M junction. So in India, when I ask, and I use this line all the time, when I ask everyone, what's India's biggest e-commerce company? People think Flipkart and Snapdeal and all of those, and Amazon India, and those are fine. But frankly, they're Western imitations with some adaptation for India. The truly novel and the biggest by far Indian e-commerce company is a company called M Junction, which is based in Calcutta. It's bigger than all three of these other ones that I mentioned combined in transaction volume as well as in profits by far. And why is that so? What is so exciting about it? Why do I like them? Because they create auctions. Initially, it was for electronic auctions for procurement of steel and coal. It's a joint venture between Tata as well as the Steel Authority of India. Today, it does the media broadcasting rights for cricket. It does the telecom spectrum auctions, which are billion-dollar, high consequence, very secure types of transactions. So you can imagine the level of artificial intelligence and machine learning that they use is far beyond anything else. So they're based, in fact, very close to where you are. But the point is, that to me is exciting because that is novel worldwide. That is something which can be used as an India-based story, a difference in terms of how procurement is done, but also the interaction between ecosystems. Now imagine I can connect different partners in the supply chain and I can be the online marketplace. Imagine a B2B solution of that sort. That completely transforms the way that companies do business with each other and with their suppliers. And on top of it, this is exportable to the world because it's based on the highest end cutting edge technology. So these are some examples.
In fact, were you saying something? I think I missed when you were saying something. Have
No,
you completed?
I'm done.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I was saying that, making the supply chain more efficient may be one of the contributions of COVID. Mm, so, for example, people are doing buying things online more than ever now. And especially that makes sense for a country which is not so resource rich like India. And people who were not used to buying things on the digital platforms are now doing it. And when we talk of frugal innovations, actually, it is not only about frugal products or frugal services. It is also about a frugal business model. It is also about a frugal process or a frugal mindset. So, one, that what we've seen is that we need to deal with nature in a way in which we respect nature. It is important and necessary to respect nature. And unless natural resources are there, human beings are not going to survive. But human beings, I think that is the strongest instinct that human beings have is the instinct for survival. So I'm sure human beings will realize that and they will minimize or reduce their exploitation of nature. And one of the things that will happen, I don't know, maybe real estate might suffer because of this, because we already see that we don't need two different places for office and home. That we are already seeing that your home can become an office. So real estate might have to do some readjustment, but a supply chain definitely is going to become much more efficient and much more frugal and cost effective is what I see a big opportunity in this situation.
Yes,
And I
no,
was
please.
talking. I was consulting with an automobile parts manufacturing company, and they had, after the lockdown, they had reopened, and their focus was to reach those levels of production which they had pre-COVID, with the social distancing being maintained. And their engineers were sharing with me that we have been able to devise processes by which we are maintaining social distance yet, and that was July. In July, they had already reached the per day production level to the pre-COVID level. So innovations are taking place. People are finding their ways around the crisis, and that is the hope that we have that, yeah, things are going to turn out better in definitely in certain ways.
I fully agree with you. And I think that's also because when we're thrust into a situation like this and we have no choice, right? What we're going to do as human nature, we're not at the end of our ingenuity. And what happens is that we essentially will come up with novel solutions. And what COVID is allowing us to do is to actually bring those to the forefront, push us even further. So, India's Mars mission is a great example. If you look at India's Mars mission, what happened is that, Indian ISRO does not have the resources that a NASA does in terms of the tens of billions of dollars, right? So to use the same approaches to send something to Mars is not going to work. Instead, having this quote unquote slingshot idea and leveraging the natural orbit to do it, did it at a fraction of the cost. Yes, maybe the precision and the probabilities are a little bit different, but all of a sudden that becomes something that everyone has to look at, right? And so those are also areas. So for me, the supply chain side is a given, just like you say, the supply chain side, it will become more efficient. For me also, when it comes to other areas, even on the highest end, how we go about doing innovation, how people work together, how they network, we can actually have many more connections and therefore many more ideas of people coming together because of this work from home or distributed model. I think that will also lead to much more innovation. And so the process of innovation, I think, will also be accelerated. And we're beginning to see that. We're beginning to see it because right now what's happening is that you see the productivity numbers are higher of companies, and that is no coincidence, so maybe there is a more sustainable way to manage all of this.
The next question I wanted to ask you, Professor Chaudhary, was what are the specific opportunities you see for emerging markets, specifically India and other markets in Asia, Africa?
I see a number of different areas. I mean, I see, for me specifically, energy is one area, healthcare is another, education is one more, and then retail as well as banking. The reason I see these as opportunities is because in India, we have this problem, or other emerging markets have this challenge of high volume, low margin. And so that requires a very different model from the traditional type of model that we see in the West, which is based in, really on the high margin. In particular, if you look at companies like Apple and others, right? I mean, they're used to having a very high margin. And so that's not the model that's going to work in the Indian type of landscape. The reason I say these sectors, though, have different purposes. So when it comes to energy, or when it comes to healthcare, or when it comes to education, we simply cannot use the existing models, traditional energy sources, traditional healthcare infrastructure, traditional schooling infrastructure. It's impossible to build enough schools and enough hospitals and so forth to be able to cover the country. It's not going to work that way. So we have to come up with combinations of what you and I are doing now, and technology such as simulation, asynchronous learning, and so forth, in order to bridge that divide and that gap, right? When it comes to something like banking, the reason I see the opportunity is because of the kinds of things that you were describing. The needs in India are very different. We have basic financial inclusion needs. There's so many of the population is unbanked. So how do we best reach them? And in India, for instance, the mobile platform is a very powerful one. Why do I say that? So I was having a conversation with the CEO of Uber. We all know Uber. In India, of course, Ola is equally, if not more popular. But in Uber, I was having a conversation with him, and I was saying that, look, it's something which is, why are we struggling in India compared to other places? Why can't we just easily defeat someone like an Ola? And I said, well, look, it's very simple. Have you seen your app? I mean, your app is so clunky. It consumes so much data. Who wants to waste all that data? Send me a text message, and I have the information about the car. I can use the light version. And I said, you think about all this because you have unlimited data in the Western markets that you serve. But in a market like India, you have to have a simpler version. You need to simplify things in order to make it work. And I told them the reason you didn't think about it is because a smartphone for you was a given. Data was ubiquitous. In India, however, those things are expensive and hard to get. And you want simplicity as a result. So there's just some of the examples of industries. The technology sector for me is also very exciting, but I will tell you, we need to push on the high end. India is sometimes very content, and this is where in achieving something, let's say even the IT companies, and then not taking it to, I want to challenge the IBMs of this world. So we're quite content with playing in the middle level. I want us to be the best, so that's where we need a little bit of ambition to bring us to the very top. In fact, there was a conference that the Prime Minister had convened last month called Vaibhav, and it was on how can we improve innovation and R&D coming from Indian organizations, novel approaches from India. And so it was very, very critical for us to be, to think about that, not from a Western perspective, but from an Indian perspective. And there's a lot of great discussion because we don't have the resources. And one of the ideas that came out of it is that in India, the nexus between educational institutions and research organizations and other companies on the innovation front has to be formed in a way where we're not just theoretical, but we're very applied. And so, where I see a lot of opportunity in India is high-end innovation, and I want to see that. I want to see the Apples and Ubers and these ideas, not just emulating it, more of the M junction type of model rather than the Flipkart, though we need that too. I'm just purposely provoking you a little bit.
No, but those are wonderful ideas, and it's true that we need to be in that space. I am just curious to know a bit more about your hybrid programs. You've been talking about simulations and asynchronous learning, and even for executives, you are having hybrid programs. So, being a learning institute, I would like to know a bit more about how you are doing your hybrid programs.
Certainly. I think earlier the model would have been, let's say, 3 weeks on campus for something like an advanced management program, general management program. And they may be, or even a company specific program, like there's some we did for an automaker, for example. And they may have been spread out also across different parts of the year. Now, the way we would do it, reconceptualizing it now, even post COVID, is to think about it as what needs to happen at Wharton in person and what can be done from afar. So a lot of the basics in terms of, let's say fundamental strategy or fundamental finance or these other marketing and so forth, those can be done, their standard material, just from afar. However, when it comes to the interaction, such as problem solving together, the networking activities, the coming up with, say, a post-COVID or any other plan on how do you build organizational resilience, we want people in the room. The creative work, the problem solving, the innovation, we want that. So then we carefully are going through all our content and saying what can be done from afar at people's own leisure whenever they have time, not on our time, or rather fixed by our time and time differences, and what are the elements doing which we really want them together and make it more meaningful. The other thing that we're doing is we're connecting the participants in ways like never before. So they start interacting with each other on a virtual medium and get comfortable. And then when they come, they have a certain sense of belonging. It doesn't all happen in those 3 weeks that we're here. Another example of what we do. Sometimes, that was more for what we call open enrollment, which is programs where there's a standard topic, managing M&A or becoming a general manager, something like that. In company-specific programs, let's say IBM comes to us and says that we have 40 managers whom we see as high potentials. We'd like to educate them for the next level. What we used to do is, let's say one module in January, let's say in Philadelphia, one module in May in our San Francisco campus, and one module in Beijing, in September sometime to conclude it. And it was largely this. And then there was a project that would thread its way through to connect the ideas and make some sort of capstone. But, we didn't have much part of that. We had to rely on the company to manage those projects and the learning. Now, though, we build in these online components in between so that we too can much more easily help these projects mature. And then by the end of the program, these high potential executives can present something which is not just their doing, but also influenced by us as it gets shaped. Those are just two examples of it.
Thank you so much. So we have some questions from the participants, which I have jotted down, and I'd like to ask you those. But before I start asking participant questions, there's one last question which I'd like to ask you, and which is in the crisis situation, where innovations are becoming difficult, managing people, managing processes, everything is a challenge right now. What can a leader do to innovate better during this time? What will be the leadership?
I think leadership has a very critical role, because one of the things that's not happening, one of the biggest challenges, how do you build an organizational culture in a time when people are distributed? Now, that is in terms of maintaining a culture amongst people who are already in the organization. But think about all the new recruits you have. Think about all the new talent that's joining, and they're joining virtually perhaps. How can we keep this alive if people are working from home or much of the time? Now, people consider organizational culture to be soft on the one hand, but honestly, the ethos of a company how we think, what we want to solve, what are our priorities and values, governs everything from where we place our resources to how we do business. And so it's not just something, so that's why we hear of, the best companies. Apple has a unique culture, and Microsoft has a unique culture, and SPI has a unique culture, and Tata has a unique culture. It's more than just the processes, right? So how do you nurture something like that? How do you do talent management? How do I discover who's really that good? How do I nurture my executives and help them grow? How do I do mentoring? All of this becomes much more difficult in especially a work from home environment in this crisis. So some of the best practices that we've observed is that we need to really do two things. Number one is there needs to be a much more, it's easy, people tend to do a lot of big meetings when we're online. But having that one-on-one communication is something that you need to overcompensate for, because it's not happening in a natural way anymore, where you run into someone, by the coffee machine, and then you see how they're doing and you nurture them, right? And so instead, we have to do it more consciously. In addition, there's some research that my colleague Adam Grant was pointing to, where basically new connections are being reinforced right now, but only if you actually make an effort to do so. Otherwise, what happens is what's dominating is old connections. So we have to find ways. So good managers, what they're doing is they're actually setting up separate meetings and small breakout discussions between people who are new and themselves, and selectively orchestrating the network. So now you're new, I want to pair you with someone and really make an interaction, or small groups where they can get comfortable. Those are some of the ways in which managers are doing it. In terms of assessing talent, what they're also doing is we have new metrics in place. It's not about office time or these impressions anymore. We have new productivity measures that we're seeing, right? So across different companies, I don't want to name them actually, but there's one who won't mind, which is the Graduate Management Admissions Council, GMAC. GMAC is the company that produces the GMAT test, and they're the market leader, obviously, in that. They dominate that space. They're monopolist. So what they're doing is they have different productivity metrics now. So they're trying to look at novel measures such as productivity in terms of how, rather than measuring how many and monitoring how many hours people are online, they're looking at the number of ideas that are produced. And is the number of ideas less than before, or is it the same as before? They're looking at the number of new connections that somebody is producing, for instance, right? They're looking at the number of, for example, they're looking at sales, but they're looking at it at a very micro level now. And they're trying to see, are there differences, and what are the differences across these different individual players? Is there a correlation between on-site and being online and anything of that sort? These are the kinds of things that are happening. But honestly, this is just evolving. We don't have the answers yet, so we are coming up with these things and learning about practices as it's happening. It's frankly only after the fact we will be able to see what works and what doesn't.
But it does appear that during this time when people might be feeling more isolated and away from the workplace, away from the colleagues, it does make sense for leaders to communicate more rather than less. Now, a number of people might be communicating less at this point in time, but the need is that leaders need to communicate more and in a more meaningful way, one-on-one, in smaller groups, making new connections, as you said. And we have to compensate for actually what is not happening, and more effort needs to go in the communication part of it.
Yeah,
So
and I think
that was...
minor thing on that, which is that the communication, you're absolutely right. And what needs to happen is we have to have more empathy on the one hand, but also we have to set our expectations more explicitly. Because, also in written communication, it's not as obvious. When I see you, I kind of know what to expect. But when I don't see you as often, if that's the case, I need to really communicate much more often and be more deliberate. If an analog is exercise, people don't realize, even when you're in the office, you're walking around a lot, whether it's to visit the restroom or the colleague or the coffee machine, the number of steps that you actually take is much higher. Today, working from home and sitting here in front of Microsoft Teams and Zoom, you will need to do much more than your usual exercise to compensate even from the routine walking that you used to do in the office, right? And those are the kinds of things. It's the same thing with communication and everything else.
Yeah, and empathy, and of course connect with the colleagues, but the focus on the goal and the strategy nevertheless has to be maintained. So That also needs to be stressed to that degree. And now, if you allow me, I'll put some of the participants' questions to you.
Sure.
Okay. So the first question I have here is, in view of the prevailing pandemic crisis, what should the financial institutions like public sector banks in India or emerging economies do to have proactive preparedness for similar situations in the future?
Yeah, I think this is, the question comes in the form of a banking context, but really this applies to a much broader set of companies. I mean, if you look at it, one of the ideas that we're working on right now is organizational resilience. So we talk a lot about personal resilience, right? But organizational resilience or even national resilience is a different context, right? Is a different concept, because a person can perhaps handle some of these things in different forms and can get support. How do I manage an entire organization? The answer that we're starting to come to, but we don't have good answers yet, is we need a lot more flexibility in the system. And so what tends to happen in organizations is that they get fixated on certain processes which work very well. And as a result, we're not able to quickly pivot when conditions change. And then that really becomes our undoing. So how do you create organizational agility or flexibility? We need to actually set aside slack resources. We cannot actually be, the realization we're coming to, which is counterintuitive, is you cannot be really extreme, you cannot be 100% efficient. Because by definition, adjustment requires redundancy. It requires different approaches. So in retail, for instance, I should not just do everything online, by the way. What I should, because the next virus that could lay everything, that could come is something that happens and affects our technology and lays, and creates a problem here. What I should do is I should have multimodal approaches. In banking, it's the same. So the more I have different ways for me to do banking, whether it's on my app, whether it's in person, whether it's going and having a separate kind of handheld, whether it's traditionally online, in a web-based environment, whether it's a digital solution where there's a screen but no person that I can go to in a physical branch, I need a multitude of different options. That's one way of thinking about resilience. We have to have different pathways at all points in time, but it comes with organizational slack. And that's the number one thing that we're finding. Those organizations that have set aside different approaches, haven't put all eggs in one basket, they're the ones able to respond. And perhaps, Dr. Ahmed, you will have some answers on this because you're in the middle of it.
I like to say, not specifically for banks, but for everyone else, in all likelihood, the next crisis may not be similar. No, crisis might be unexpected, but if it is similar, it is easier for us. So the example that's coming to my mind is that of Japan, because they are shaken quite frequently by earthquakes. Their houses are made of wood, so that they can the damage is minimal and they can rebuild quickly. So yes, slack resources, definitely. We need to have several backups, different forms of backup. If this happens, what, this happens, what, this happens, what. So we have to have a sort of future forecasting scenario on various kinds of disruptions that may happen, and what are the backups that we might require. And of course, organizational resilience plus the resilience in the mindset. And we've been, the entire population, wherever in the world, we have been showing that resilience, thankfully, is the nature of human being. And so, yes, very important is to build individual resilience as well. Leaders themselves and building resilience in our teams and having, various sorts of backups for, if this happens, what will I do? And so that was what was coming to my mind. There is a very interesting question which I want to put to you. There's this participant who's asking, let's say there's a person who's got an idea, but isn't able to implement it, but doesn't know the next step. He knows that the idea is amazing, but he doesn't know how to go to the next step. What is the second best approach he or she should take to go forward and turn his or her idea into a working prototype? This is from a student in a business school.
I think that's a wonderful idea, and it's very India. It's not just India specific; it's globally. But India has a particular challenge. Entrepreneurship and building a startup is something that everybody talks about. In fact, it's romanticized. It's we hear all our heroes now are all these entrepreneurs around the world doing things, but it's not easy to do. I think one of the important pieces, and here's where I'll draw a little bit of a distinction between the US model and perhaps the Indian model or the European model, is creating the right ecosystem for ideas to flourish, which includes access to some funding, but also more importantly includes access to mentorship, is extraordinarily important in that scenario. So, of course, we've always had entrepreneurship. The person who builds a store, who builds a restaurant, who does all those things is also an entrepreneur. But at the same time, if I'm a business school student and I want to take an idea, what can I do? So at places like Wharton, what we of course have is we have a whole entrepreneurship program. So what happens here is that you can go to our entrepreneurship division and say, I have this idea. And you'll be paired with a mentor. There'll be a venture competition that you can, for instance, do. And as part of that competition, you can put forth your idea. And then what you can do is, as a result, you then get funding if you win something, right? That's also a test of your ideas. I want to actually invite all of you, the student who mentioned the question about everyone else. Wharton does something like that in India. As part of the Wharton India Economic Forum, which always takes place in January. Now, it's usually physically in Bombay, but the competition takes place earlier as well. So the Wharton India Economic Forum is something where there's a startup competition. And we do it purposefully because in India, while the biggest business schools have such infrastructure and the ecosystems in place, it's not the case just in general. But please, submit your ideas into forums like this. Even in India, there's so many different new venture competitions. For me, the best way to do it, to test my idea, is put my idea forth in something like that and then try it as a business school student and then see what comes of it. I'll get good feedback, and if I can prevail, in which I will at some point, then what happens is I get the support, the mentorship, but also a little bit of funding to try my idea. That's the next step to move forward.
Thank you for offering him that. And yes, as you said, in Indian business schools also, there are innovation centers where the idea can be placed and they'll support you. So, for example, in IIM Calcutta, we have an innovation center, in Tata Institute of Social Science, and I'm sure in IIT Delhi we have. So, many business schools would be having those innovation centers, which would be ready to support you if you feel your idea is amazing. There is this third question, which is also quite intriguing. And this person says frugal innovation more often leads to higher consumption levels by a larger chunk of the demography, which further leads to further exploitation of resources and may also lead to a new set of consumerism of scales. How can they be made environmentally friendly?
I think there are perhaps many assumptions in there. It depends on what kind of frugal innovations we're talking about, But let's go with it for a minute. Let's go with it for a minute. I think that the bigger point here: how can we make something, innovation and frugal innovation, which is environmentally sustainable? Here's where I will say that anything we do, and India has an advantage in this, we need to build in some sort of impact measures as well in how we go about doing things, right? I mean, I think that the time when we only look at, and India has never been this way, but the West has really, worked on a model of shareholder value creation. India has always had a stakeholder model. How do a company like Tata is a great example. My employees, my suppliers, my impact on society in general, all of that is measured. And I think we need to build that out. So any innovation, when you think about it, has some metrics. And as part of the metrics, whether I'm a venture capitalist or I'm a company or I'm an individual, I should not just look at the profit. What I need to do is I need to think about what impact could this potentially have. So one downside of all this delivery at home is, at least in the West, is you have so many boxes that are being consumed now. Many more boxes. Yes, you could say the paper industry is doing quite well as a result, and the cardboard industry. But as a result, there are too many boxes that pile up that we have to recycle. Why not use, we have to think about more ways of maybe those are getting, materials or boxes that are being picked up again or made out of jute in order to be able to, or other natural fibers, so that we can take them, reuse them, and move it forward. But for me, there's no other way but make it a requirement that in my measurement, in my metrics, I build in sustainability of some sort, and that'll be a way to do it. And we can get incentives from the government, for instance, to do those kinds of things, right? I mean, if you have something which reduces energy consumption and is more effective, let's say a device, you will get a tax break for it. Something like that can be encouraged through policy as well. That's something which come to mind. Maybe Dr. Ahmed, you may have some more ideas on that too.
Yes, I would like to add to what you said, and this is the concept of Earth Overshoot Day. In the year 2019, last year, that date was some date in July. The Earth Overshoot date is that date by which the Earth has already consumed all of the resources it can produce in that year. So 30 years back, we were very comfortable. We had more produce than consumption. But every year, the date has been inching closer to January. Now, only 2020, because of COVID, we moved 3 weeks ahead. So this year it fell somewhere in August. And now I wanted to share with the participants that there are certain countries who consume their resources in 2 months. The resources that they produce, they consume in 2 months, 2.5 months, 3 months. Whereas there are other countries and poorer countries in Asia and Africa, the natural resources that they produce is far greater than what they consume. So this is about the human condition. Can we and do we support this kind of inequality where those who have can go on exploiting the resources that those that belong to others? So generally, what I am a very big supporter of frugal. And I would say that everyone needs to have that mindset that, yes, I have a responsibility towards others, towards myself, shareholders, stakeholders, as you said, to the entire universe on whom I depend. So we cannot go on with this kind of inequality which we are facing. So those countries who are using more resources are actually using the resources of others. One last question, maybe, or I think I'll skip because it is 10 o'clock, very late for many of us. And I really, really want to thank all the participants, almost all of whom have stuck right from the beginning till the end. So we'll close now. But before closing, I'll request our DGM admin, Mr. Sushim Das, to please come on screen, come onto the stage, please.
Yeah. Thank you, madam.
Please, put on your webcam.
Yeah, thank you, madam, for giving this opportunity. And good evening to all participants. And very good morning to Professor Chaudhary, Shaikot Chaudhary. I had the opportunity to interact with you personally also when you visited last time. It was nice having you in our virtual conference and this discussion. Really, it was a very great, it was a very interesting discussion. I was going through right from beginning the challenges and the opportunities that crisis gives us. Then the way you narrated your experience and your thoughts and touching all over the world, right? You have given the perspective of US, perspective of Europe, and also I was surprised you have so much detailed knowledge about the Indian context also. So really, it was a great learning for us, and particularly this the way you describe this crisis or opportunities and the challenges as the process innovation. You mentioned the innovation of the processes. The other normally innovation as a layman we know it is the IT innovation or something like that, but you mentioned it is a process innovation, innovation of organizational behavior and all that. And the examples you have given to each of your observation, that was great. Whether it is a Disney, whether it is even the Cadbury ad, and whatever you have mentioned, auto, pharma, you have touched every aspect of this present crisis situation. And also, nevertheless, you have discussed about the hybrid model of the program that you are doing. And there are a lot of learning points from that, which we can also think of as a learning institute in the in our future courses. The leadership that you have described, what is the role of leader in this crisis situation? That was also some new insights we got. And the way you described that was a really very interesting talk. And the time, how it 1.5 hours almost we passed, but we could not feel it. So thank you very much, Professor Chaudhary, for being with us and giving your valuable time and sharing your thought and experience. I feel all these attendees and participants really there will be a lot of takeaways from your discussion, and they hope to meet you once again with similar type of discussion in future. Thank you
And
very much.
even an in-person discussion,
In
Sushim.
person, good.
And let us
Yeah,
take
yeah.
this opportunity to
Yes.
invite Professor Chaudhary to SBI in person as soon as it is
Yeah,
possible and
yeah.
safe for you to come. Please do
So
visit
actually,
us.
I was very excited because this collaboration with Waton. For a long time, we were discussing how to go about and all that. And the first time this we could organize this one. This is the beginning only. This is journey begins here from here. So definitely in the future also we will be having a lot of collaborations, and it will take it forward further. Thank you, sir, for joining with us. And also, I thank Salia Madam for conducting this session and bringing this important and interesting topic to all of us. There are a lot of takeaways. Thank you very much. On this occasion, I also thank our director, sir, Mr. Saroj Patnaik, for giving his welcome address and setting the tone of the discussion.